Hi, Sai, Karate Illuminati. This is Noah, and I'm answering your karate questions. This question is asking about Chudan-Uke, the middle-level receiver, and how it can be applied in self-defense, particularly when dealing with a jab. Now, this comment was left on a video where I was briefly demonstrating how the Chudan-Uke motion could be used offensively to strike. And the reason for this is the vast majority of karateka are introduced to ukewaza, or receiving techniques, as blocks. And Chudan-Uke is no different. Many karate practitioners are taught that the way you use Chudan-Uke is to block an incoming punch. And there's a number of problems with this approach, which is why it isn't my standard approach to teaching how to use this motion. Now, the striking application in that original video actually can be used against a jab, but it will be a little bit different than if we're dealing with a fully committed attack, something like a haymaker that has all this extra follow-through, because of course jabs are meant to be snapped back. That said, we are talking about self-defense, and in self-defense, the vast majority of people who are going to attack you don't actually have any martial arts training. So while they may attempt to throw a jab, most people without training have a tendency to sort of drop their hands as they punch, even though they're trying to bring the hands back. So most of the jabs that you're going to deal with in real self-defense situations aren't proper trained jabs. They are just these sort of lazy straight punches. And that's something that is a little more easy to deal with than a properly snappy jab. But we can still make this technique work regardless. To quickly recap that striking application, we have the kosa, the crossing action of our Chudan-Uke, used to parry the attack, right? Doesn't really matter which hand or where it's coming from. All we're doing is parrying it with one hand, and that other hand is then going to come across to strike. So if they're throwing a jab with this hand, I parry it, and I'm going to bring this hand around it to strike into the neck or into the face. That works pretty much regardless of whether or not he's throwing a big swinging punch or whether he's throwing a jab, if that jab is the lazy, untrained jab. The difference really comes in when they actually punch and snap it back to a guard position, because of course the parry works no matter what. We made sure that the punch doesn't hit us. But that jab, if it's done properly, is going to come right back up to his face. And that means that when I try to come in and strike with this hand, it's going to be blocked. There's no strike that I can land here because he's got a guard up. But that doesn't mean that what I've done isn't beneficial to me. Because of course now, with my arm putting pressure on his arm, he can't punch me with that hand anymore until he gets it free. He'll have to try and pull it free, or he'll have to try and attack me with that hand. Now, I know he's going to want to do that. I can choose to deal with that punch, or I can choose to take control of the arm that I have right here. And this gets back into the use of hikite, our pulling hand, because now I can grab a hold of that and pull as I step off to the side. Now, this makes it much harder for him to punch me, because I've moved away from his punching hand, and I have affected his posture by pulling him. And of course I can throw my own punch over the top, which now he has no way to really block effectively. Yes, he can try and bring that hand across his face to cover, but that's not a very effective block against a punch like this. So yes, we have transitioned from this technique into this technique, but it is still a pretty simple way to use the exact same application with a different follow-up based on what you encounter along the way. All that said, if you want to have a purely defensive application for your Chudan-Uke when dealing with a jab, you might consider looking at it as dealing with a jab and a follow-up punch from the other hand, rather than the jab by itself. Again, we can use that initial crossing action to parry the incoming jab, and while we could try to come in using our other arm to apply pressure to that guard, if they're throwing another punch, then we might as well simply block that punch with our forearm. Now, this doesn't really take into account footwork, it doesn't take into account the use of hikite, the pulling hand. It's very basic, but this is still one of the ways that that you can look at using this motion from a purely defensive standpoint. Of course, these are just a few simple example applications for this movement, and there are many other ways that it can be applied. So if you're interested in learning more about this or other techniques and how they might be applied in varying scenarios, feel free to throw it in the comment section and I'll address it as best I can.